Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. 2 days ago, Brenton Tarrant, an Australian man in New Zealand, attacked Muslims inside a mosque, together with 2 accomplices who attacked an Islamic center. This resulted in a big massacre where 49 people died and more than 40 were injured. I wanted to publish a video about Dawah strategies today, but since this has been going on, I thought it would be just appropriate to talk about this and all the stuff that has been going on since then. It's not even a question. This terrorist act, committed by someone who identifies as an ethno-nationalist and eco-fascist, is a horrible, unthinkable act of violence. It is despicable. In the video footage that he streamed live during the massacre, you can see his inhumane brutality and relentlessness. With multiple firearms that he prepared for this terrorist act, he shoots people who are begging for their lives and wants to send out a message of fear. Terror. It is a horrible act, a despicable act. It is anything but the solution to everything we talk about in society. But there has been a lot of finger-pointing, a lot of talk, mostly clueless talk, about this whole tragedy, and these talks have mostly included ignorance, ill intent, or hypocrisy. Let us make a few things clear first. One of the most widely circulated and believed things is that Islamophobic, anti-Islamic, or anti-Muslim speech fueled this attack and was responsible for it. That this is an act of Islamophobic, anti-Muslim xenophobia. People then went on accusing regular critics of Islam and Muslims. I have even been asked if I was now happy about this attack. This issue usually comes from not thinking the whole thing through, or being emotional and biased. The killer released a manifesto, in which he made all his thoughts and intentions clear. Of course, the mainstream media, politicians, and many others have either ignored this manifesto, never read it, cherry-picked it, or selected specific parts of the manifesto with political bias. To get the whole Islamophobia thing out of the way, this was not an act and example of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiments and hate speech in this regard. If we simply look at the manifesto, we see that the terrorist didn't have anything against Islam as a religion, or against Muslims as a religious group and what they believe in. He says that he doesn't even dislike Muslims who live in their own lands. In another part of his manifesto, he also says that he visited different cultures and liked interacting with them and liked their hospitality. We even have recently circulated pictures and blog posts of him visiting countries like Pakistan or Turkey. People are also trying to connect that to some conspiracy theory, by the way, but that's again an ignorance of the manifesto. In there, he admits the visiting of those countries and cultures and liking them. He goes on further, saying that he only dislikes Muslims who choose to, quote, invade our lands, live on our soil, and replace our people. Yes, I dislike them. He also adds that the only Muslims he hates are Europeans who convert to Islam because he sees them as traitors to the European heritage and culture. So why did he attack Muslims inside a mosque? He answers that question too in his manifesto. They were an obvious, visible, and large group of invaders from a culture with higher fertility rates, higher social trust, and strong, robust traditions that seek to occupy my people's lands and ethnically replace my own people. The shooter's problem was not what Islam is and what Muslims believe and represent. He describes himself as an ethno-nationalist, a nationalist based on common heritage, faith, and ancestry. An eco-fascist, someone who wants to protect the environment and the country's resources in order to defend the country's ethnic people through a totalitarian system. And a racist, insofar that his idea of keeping the West white and fighting all non-European immigrants is racist. I know many people use the word racist as an accusation, but that's only our point of view. Others gladly accept the term for themselves. The most dominant themes of his manifesto are white genocide and birth rates. He believes that a white genocide is going on, that white people are dying, and that other groups with higher fertility rates are replacing white people. And he thinks the solution to that is to kill people and maniacally start a race war. This is an ideology that is held very, very rarely within society, and even then, much rarely violent. It has nothing to do with Islam and Muslims, only with the fact that Muslims are non-Europeans. He also admits that he first targeted Muslims because they have been responsible for terrorist acts and historical fights with Europe, and says that targeting Muslims first would give his cause more attention, something he has achieved now. and that other groups would follow. If we called this attack Islamophobic now, and the terrorists got away, and attacked Indians next, then black people, then Asians, and added group-specific slogans to each one of them, would we also say, oh, he hates Indians, this is Indophobia. Oh, now he hates black people, typical white guy. Oh, he hates Jews, this is an anti-Semitic Nazi. Oh, he hates Asians, how does that happen? See, it doesn't make sense. That's why it doesn't make sense calling this an anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic sentiment. This is simply misleading and leads us away from the fact that this is a wider scheme of a crazy race war. Also, it is very wrong to blame this on people who regularly criticize Islam. People mostly criticize Islam for how morally wrong and violent it is. We don't encourage or condone violence against mainstream Muslims. No regular critic of Islam would do that and does that. I have spoken against such things forever. I was a Muslim myself. My parents are Muslims. I still know many Muslims and I like them. I would like to see them leave their religion behind, oppose it, and join the rest of us in normal political discussions about the world and our disagreements. Because I think that Islam is a problematic religion that keeps them back, and the rest of us as well. This discussion, this intellectual opposition to Islam, is something completely different. This discussion on Islam, this criticism of Islam and intellectual opposition to Islam, in order to create better societies, is something politically completely different from what Brenton Tarrant, the terrorist, believed in, which is to uphold the white heritage and to fight all others within the country. It's not even related. Ironically, accusing me of being happy about a terrorist act on Muslims or being responsible for that would be very similar to me accusing each Muslim, each individual Muslim, of being responsible or happy about every Islamic terrorist attack in London and Paris. And I never did that, and I won't do that. How would the general public feel about such a reaction? How would a regular Muslim feel? It is ridiculous that most people would immediately have an objection to that. But the second a terrorist attack happens against Muslims, everyone is blamed. Another problem is calling this attack an example of Christian hate and extremism. Although by his manifesto, he's not even a Christian. His manifesto has a pagan symbol on the cover, the black sun, which is meanwhile frequently used by extreme white nationalists. On whether he's a Christian, he even says that it's complicated, and he'll let us know when he knows. No believing Christian says that, let alone a Christian extremist. And his manifesto ends with, "I'll see you in Valhalla." Come on. What is funny though is that Trump and other people are held responsible for Brenton Tarrant's actions as well, because he mentions that he supports Trump for his white identity, but definitely not for his leadership and policies. This happens despite the fact that Trump never made any exclusivist white nationalist comments or policies. But Trump is held responsible because of his previous words and sentiments about Islamic extremism. This is such a far reach, but also an example of blatant hypocrisy, because it comes from the same people who also try to tell us that an Islamic terrorist who references the Quran and the Hadith, Islamic scripture, who believes in Islam, who proclaims an Islamic state, had nothing to do with Islam. So imagine an ethno-nationalist fascist terrorist mentions Trump in his paper, and Trump is to blame. But an Islamist terrorist believes in Islam, quotes the Quran and the Hadith, mentions Muhammad, and pledges allegiance to an Islamic state, but has nothing to do with Islam at all. But who is surprised about such hypocrisy? I'm not. I don't even want to get into these discussions, but when you go on Twitter or on the media, on social media, if you just look around and look at what people say, it's inevitable. The climate is crazy. The terrorist also humorously mentioned Candace Owens, a black person, and mockingly said how Candace inspires him, which is obviously a dumb joke, but the mainstream media took it seriously and blamed Candace Owens. He also mentioned PewDiePie for attention, and they went after PewDiePie, a peaceful and funny personality on YouTube who just makes people laugh. What is more hypocritical is that we are all blamed and forced to say something about this incident, when we are told not to do these things when an Islamic attack occurs. When we are told the Muslim community might fear repercussions when an Islamic terrorist attack happens, or when churches and Christian minorities are attacked around the world and in the Muslim world. But suddenly, in this case, when a racist lunatic goes out and relentlessly kills innocent people, we are all supposed to feel guilty. What is sad is that we are talking about this issue so much, and pointing fingers left and right, and looking for how this happened, and the responsible parties, and trying to crucify everyone, and following exactly what the terrorists wanted people to do, which he explicitly explained in his manifesto, to create an atmosphere of disagreement, fear, and division. This issue is not in any way related to intellectual criticism of Islam and regular reasonable talks about our disagreements. Neither is it related to politically held mainstream positions about immigration and mass immigration. This is an extremely rare act of extremism, of unthinkable violence, of monstrosity. We need to talk to each other. We need to discuss things that we like or dislike in order to find solutions like normal people. If we shut discussions down and label any kind of normal speech as hate speech and Islamophobia, or sensitive and therefore not allowed, if we are going to vilify and censor and silence each other, we will leave the discourse to people who won't find any meaning in talking, and who will become violent and kill people, because they think that a change that couldn't be made through political and diplomatic means, by exchanging opinions, no matter how controversial they are, could somehow be made by massacre and fear. If it comes to that, we will always kill and destroy the possibilities of talking about things and maybe even convincing each other. We should never let it come to that. That's why we need to be able to talk to each other and stop violence, really stop violence and extremism wherever it occurs. Because no matter from what mind and from what side it comes, shedding blood, spreading fear, destroying lives will never bring anything better than what we are afraid of. And still, and therefore, stay away from Islam.